Thanks for listening to the Forest Ramble podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review on your podcast provider, as this helps other Forest supporters find our content. Now on with the pod.
It's been a bumper month at the City Ground. A huge amount has gone on in the first month of the season. There have been a lot of matches and a lot of transfer activity. Welcome to Rich Ferraro's Forest Ramble. I'm delighted to be joined, as usual, by Steven Toplis. Hello.
Hello.
And by the Maradona the Midlands. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, as I said earlier, it's been a bumper month. In terms of matches going on, in terms of results, well, I think there's been two highlights when it comes to results. And to me, I would say that the away victory at Fulham is the league highlight. And I would also say that, of course, the Carabao Cup victory against the old rivals was also a very enjoyable occasion. Stephen, you've got the list of results over the last month or so there. What's been your highlights, if anything, different?
I enjoyed the Fulham game in particular. It helped that I was there and Forest won. That was a great day out. And then following that up with a 3-0 win over Derby. It doesn't matter if Derby put out a slightly weakened team. Forest made 8 changes themselves and put in a really, really good display and beat them 3-0. That's just a result to enjoy, even if it is just in the League Cup early rounds. So, yeah, there's been a few results there that you can take a lot of enjoyment from. The other one for me is the 3-0 win over Birmingham, where Forest blew them away. 2 goals in the first half, and it was a very comfortable game for them. And
is there anything to be concerned about the fact that, you know, the Birmingham and Derby matches, which were the thumping victories we've had, anything to be concerned about in the fact that they were against 2 quite poor teams?
You can only beat what's put in front of you, and you've got to put teams away when they're there and to be beaten. And to Forest's credit, they did that. And we've seen already in these first few games different approaches from this Forest team. You've had those games where they've gone for the jugular against Birmingham and Derby, where they've sensed a weakness and they've put 2 teams away there. They've had those moments in games where they've been behind and they've been really struggling. Think of Leeds and Charlton, where they were outplayed for long spells, but they got themselves back into the game and came away with a result. On both occasions, 1-1 draws. And you've also seen away at Fulham a good mix of defensive resolve, which is needed against a strong Fulham team that can play really good football. But then when Forest did have the ball in that game, they were clinical on the break, clinical in possession when they had it. And that's another really encouraging trait to take with us throughout the season, hopefully, that you can go away to these big teams and these favoured teams for promotion and get results against them. And if you just look at the opening goal at Fulham, where every player on the pitch in a Forest shirt touches the ball, it's a lovely move.
If it was Brazil, etc., etc.
We'd be of course, we'd be raving about it. But no, you're seeing with this Forest team different characteristics and different approaches, and that, for me, is very encouraging.
Maradona the Midlands, Lamouchi, all the indications are that he wants to have a team that does have more possession. I think in total, if you're to aggregate it out, we've probably had about 35 to 40% possession in all the matches we've played so far. But that's what you do as a manager to create progress, isn't it? Still take the simple things first and then worry about how much possession you have later.
Yeah, I mean, I think against Fulham, we were always going to struggle to have a lot of possession, and same against Leeds. They're teams who sort of are well practiced in keeping a lot of possession. Even against Birmingham, it was pretty much 50-50, but I don't think it's a tactical reason why we don't have possession. I think sometimes it's just still some poor passing from Forest and poor ball possession. I don't think they go out to say we're not going to have possession. I think the ideal in each match is try and get hold of possession and then try to hit from there. But you've got to give the credit to the opposition as well. Sometimes they're trying to do exactly the same thing. So But yeah, I think he's got the basics sorted out, and the sort of spine of the team is there now, and it's looking good.
Okay, I think, for me personally, I'm just as encouraged about how we've done in the matches where we've been up against it. Stephen, you mentioned, obviously, Leeds and Charlton as matches whereby actually we could quite easily have been steamrolled at points. But something that I kept referring to a lot last season under Karanka is resilience and mentality. And at the moment, this Forest team are playing with a good degree of confidence, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And I think it's come after the West Brom game. Losing that was obviously disappointing, but they haven't lost a game since then. They've steadily built up momentum in a run of very difficult fixtures. Going away to Leeds is your first away game of the season, and then you've got a newly promoted team in Charlton in there. You've got Fulham away, even Preston, who are tricky customers. So
Bogey team. We've sort of broken the hoodoo there.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll come on to that game as well. There's plenty to talk about with Preston, but no, the team seems to be developing confidence, and with every game that passes, that's a promising sign because the results are there. It's an unbeaten run as well, and I think if you'd have handed this to a Forest fan at the end of the first month of the season, having looked at the fixtures that we had, to have 9 points on the board, 2 wins and 3 draws, and only 1 defeat from the 6 opening games in the league, I don't think is too shabby at all.
And this is where I actually would like to remind everyone that actually Sabri Lamouchi came in after pre-season had started with less than 3 weeks to go before the season. And at that point as well, the only signing that Forest had made was Sami Amiobi. So I think that actually Lamouchi has to take a huge amount of credit in terms of getting the team to play in a certain way. I say mentality-wise, the Derby match is a great case in point for the very simple reason that you switch around 8 players, but it was almost seamless in terms of the players knew what their jobs were and they were able to slot in almost, well, the phrase is like-for-like replacements, and it's never like-for-like, but it was in that particular instance, wasn't it? So I think Lamouchi has to take a huge amount of credit, and we'll come back to him a little bit later. I mean, Maradona, the Midlands, going back 1 month to when we were talking after the West Brom match, we were saying there that Forest were good in possession and they were not very good without it. That's a mark of progress, isn't it? The Leeds match really showed that Lamouchi addressed that because, just a few days later, for Forest to be under the cosh, but to be so resilient and to get that point is surely a real signifier of the fact that, the manager, we can have confidence in how he's approaching things. Yeah,
I mean, it was a surprise that we came back in that game because I think the commentators were trotting out a stat about how little Forest have managed to come back from losing positions in the past year or so. And I wasn't very confident. As soon as Leeds went 1-0 up, I thought, well, that's game over. But they showed great resilience then. And also, it was important to show that wasn't just a flash in the pan. They've done it again against Charlton and against Preston. I mean, I remember saying after the Leeds game, it's not often that we'll say Forest came back from being 1-0 down. So, yeah, it just goes to show how much he has done. It just in terms of not only the resilience, but the style of play as well. It's the performance against Birmingham. I can't remember the last time Forest played like that. It was really, really entertaining and has created so many chances. And that was on the back of a couple of games where they sort of struggled to create chances. Yeah. So it really was promising.
And, of course, the fact that Lewis Graben's got a decent goal return is a sign of the fact that we are creating those chances because, as has been much discussed, Graben isn't one of those forwards who will create things out of nothing. You've got to put things there for him, and then that's when he comes into his own as a master finisher.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've addressed a lot of the problems which we highlighted on our podcast towards the end of last season, where we said we just don't create chances from crosses, we don't cross the ball in, we don't have sort of little balls through from midfield. We don't have fullbacks sort of supporting the wingers, and we don't sort of get players up front supporting the strikers. And we've addressed all those problems now, and we're starting to create a lot more.
And of course, the little cameo by João Carvalho to set up Adoma against Preston, that's a great example, isn't it? Because that's a player who could easily have hit a brick wall, but then actually managed to thread that ball through. And if Adoma hadn't got it, then Graben would have done.
Yeah, it was lovely to see. A nice finish, and hopefully the first of many.
Okay. I touched upon the Preston game, and you said you know there's plenty to talk about there. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, it was an example of a team coming to the City Ground with the intention of frustrating Forest, and it's not going to be the first time this season that we see a team do that. But it was so blatant from the Preston point of view, with time wasting, players throwing themselves to the ground at the slightest touch. The referee didn't help matters either. When you've got a team doing that, you need a referee who's going to stamp it out early doors, and he didn't, and it just encouraged Preston to do it more. They did a job on us, and they got in front, and they were in the lead for a good period of the game until the moment when Carvalho unlocked the door with a lovely pass that threaded Adoma through, and he put the ball away for 1-1. So I was relieved, but I was also pleased to come out of that game with a point, because Preston, I'd say they're about level with us in terms of position in the table and sort of the results they've been getting so far this season. So on the face of it, a draw against them isn't a terrible result.
But I would also say that and I was listening to the Totally Football League show, and they were saying that Preston are in a position now where they will be wanting to take a step up, because some of their young players, or younger or less experienced players, like Brown and Malt and, Bowden, for example, that those are the ones who've now got a couple of years of championship experience under their belt. And Forest aren't there yet. Because of the turnover of players. So, yeah, we've got some very experienced campaigners like your Watsons and your Dawsons, obviously. But you look at the particularly in midfield, you look at players like Samida and Sow and Silva, and they're new to the Championship. And we know that the Championship, we've discussed it many times, is a really hard league to come into. So I think that there's a lot to be positive about there. And again, you can couple the Preston match with the Charlton match and the Leeds match, whereby, you know what, we could have, in previous, it's easy to say, isn't it? But in previous seasons, we might not have got a point out of those matches. So I think there's a lot to be positive about there. Let's move on, because we've touched upon some of the new players who've come in, and even since the last podcast, we've had some signings, and the one who's probably caught the eye most is Brice Samba in goal. Got his chance after Muric was dropped. Now, Maradona Midlands, you were very sceptical about Muric, having seen him in that West Brom match in the pre-season matches. In
terms of goalkeeping, he did improve in the next couple of games, but then the reason we brought him in, by the sounds of it, was for his distribution, and that was pretty poor, really. He was doing some good passes, but then others were sort of going straight out of play. I didn't see that much.
Isn't that what you get with a 20-year-old goalkeeper, though?
Yeah, but exactly. But that's exactly why we shouldn't be playing a 20-year-old goalkeeper if we're serious about promotion. I couldn't, from my perspective, I couldn't see why we'd take that risk and try and do Man City a favour by giving their player experience when we're...
So how does Muric get experience if...
It's not our problem. It's really not our problem. I think that's Man City's problem.
Okay.
If you look at Dean Henderson last season, Manchester United goalkeeper, went to Sheffield United and thrived for them, and he was a young, inexperienced goalkeeper, helped them to promotion, and he's now playing in the Premier League. So that you might look at an example like that and think, well...
But he had a few howlers along the way.
He did, but I'm just putting forward the Henderson example as a situation where that can work for both parties.
Okay, now, I guess a crucial thing there is that Sheffield United, and even now, to my knowledge, I don't think we have got a decent number 2 goalkeeper, whereas we've got Brice Samba, who thus far has looked good with distribution, has looked confident in commanding his box and much happier with crosses. And even, like, there's been a couple of crosses where he's come out and he's kind of thought, but he's kind of found a way to kind of, you know, that thing that a good keeper does, which is basically, I'm going to clear everything out as long as I get the ball.
He just looks like a better goalkeeper. He does. Full stop. And
that could be down to having those extra 4 or 5 years of experience.
Yeah. But that's good for us. We want the better goalkeeper in goal this season. We can't wait for Muric to be a good keeper in 3 or 4 seasons. And it's not really our job to make goalkeepers for Man City. It's our job to get promoted. So we need the best goalkeeper we can in goal now.
I agree, and it's not as if Man City could now come back to Forest and say, well, why are you not playing Muric? Just have a look at Samba and his performances.
Well, Paul Taylor, ex of the Post, now of The Athletic, has said that, to his knowledge, there's nothing in the loan deal that says that we have to play Muric, which is often a clause that Premier League clubs do insert to say, okay, we want this guy to play X% of matches if he's fit. There's nothing in there, and although it'll be disappointing for Guardiola if he doesn't play, you know, as you say, Maradona, the Midlands, we've got to have the best keeper in goal, because to do well in the Championship, you've got to start off with a solid base. The other thing we should say is obviously getting in the team helped, but he's obviously loving his time at Forest. Bearing in mind that his first interaction on social media is just to say, sorry, my English isn't very good. And then since then, he's been putting loads of stuff out there, including the famous story of the guy with the bum tattoo. So that was... fair play to the guy, because he did.
I don't understand why the Forest fan. I thought it was a Derby fan who did it initially when I saw the story going around. I can't understand why a Forest fan would say, "I'll get a tattoo if you get a clean sheet." I don't understand why. Why he was so dubious about Samba's abilities.
Well, at that time we didn't know what Team Derby were going to put out, and you know what? Hey, whatever. It's a nice story anyway. Wow. So, and let's face it. Who wants a tattoo of another man on their derriere? Yeah. So,
and that sort of thing will endear Samba to the fans as well, because it just shows a bit of relatability, good sense of humour. We don't see that very often from footballers nowadays, and I like that.
It's really. I mean, social media is a bad place to be when things are going badly. So you make hay when the sun shines, don't you? And there's quite a few Forest fans who are able to have some good interaction with some of the players, because the players are enjoying life as well, and that's really good to see. Let's talk about some of the other signings. I mean, you've got your list there. Jenkinson, I suppose, was quite high profile as a player who is experienced, but his career's never quite got going at Arsenal. So, a good signing?
I think it's a good signing. We started the season with Matty Cash at right back, and there were 1 or 2 incidents in the early games where he did look a little bit out of his depth.
I think it's fair to say that Matty Cash has done a good job at right back in the match.
He's improved.
He has improved.
Yeah, he's improved a lot. Even the performance, just 1 week after the West Brom game at Leeds, it was night and day. The improvement there. Credit to Matty. He's showed that he's more than capable.
And it does suggest as well. Okay, obviously at the moment, Derrick was out and isn't likely to play for a long time, but it does suggest that Lamouchi maybe sees Cash as being a right back rather than a midfielder, although he did, of course, play in midfield against Birmingham, didn't he?
Well, I think maybe if we're looking for playing against weaker opposition, or especially at home, I think he gives that extra attacking threat. I think we spoke about it in the first podcast of the season, where if you want that extra sort of attacking body in there with the overlapping of the fullbacks and things, I think Matty's ideal for that sort of role.
Yeah, and of course Steve Sutton did also say on Radio Nottingham about actually the international break. There's that whole thing about, well, it gives the manager a chance to do some work on the training ground and everything. But the other thing that he said that was interesting is it also gives the manager and the coaching staff the chance to just talk to the players. And one of the things that he said as an example was to say to Matty Cash, you're doing great at right back. Here's a couple of things you can work on, but here are the things you're doing well. And when you're playing Tuesday, Saturday, you don't really get that opportunity to do that in any depth. So it's great to see that Matty Cash has been able to improve in that respect. But in Carl Jenkinson, we've got an experienced at this level and at higher levels, in the Premier League, in the Champions League and so on. We've got an experienced specialist right back. Important?
Yeah, there will be times this season where having him in the squad will really make a difference. For a start, being a recognised right back, for one, that's a positive, but also Tuesday, Saturday games, you're asking a lot of your fullbacks for them to play all those games consecutively. So I think it's good to have those options where you can rotate with Jenkinson on the right and on the left-hand side, Yuri Ribeiro, who's playing backup at the minute to Jack Robinson. So you do need that competition as well in the squad. And it looks like Lamouchi is wanting, where possible, 2 players to cover every position.
Yeah.
Had Darikwa not picked up his injury or been away in the African Cup of Nations, Jenkinson might not have been signed. But the fact is, we've lost Darikwa and we do need reliable backup and options in every position. So I think it's a good signing.
And obviously, we don't know what the situation is with Jenkinson in terms of wages. In terms of fee, we understand it's probably all Forest fees are undisclosed these days.
I hate that, by the way. I hate why they don't. Why don't you disclose them anymore? It's just taking all the fun out of it.
Well, I don't have an answer for you,
Yeah.
but we understand it was in the region of about £1 million. So in terms of transfer fee, that's pretty good at this level. Say he's experienced. We don't know what his wages are, but he has left Arsenal, just like he's gone out on loan on plenty of occasions, because he wants to play. And that's what you want, isn't it? Players who actually want to play. So that, I think, is a positive thing. The other signings that we've had, we'll very briefly mention Chema Rodriguez, who made his debut against Derby. He's been brought in as the backup centre-half to cover the left-hand side. And then we'll move on to the other one that you've got there, which is John Bostock, who... My early impressions had an interesting conversation with Forest Ramble Dad, because he's going, who is this Bostock then? And I said, well, if you'd been following football in the last 10 years, you'd have heard of him. He goes, where's he come from? We signed him from Toulouse in France. Because Bostock doesn't sound like a very French name. It's like, no, he's from London. And you know what? The interview again on Radio Nottingham with Bostock, and also the early impressions he's made. He's someone who's come here because he wants to play football. Yeah, he's had a nomadic career, but he wants to try himself in the English game again. And early impressions, in the Forest v Derby match, okay, against an inexperienced opposition, but for me, Bostock was the man of the match.
Well, not just that game. When he came on against Charlton as well, he helped change it. And I was saying when he came in, I was surprised by how big he was. So I still picture him in my mind as a 15-year-old boy. So just the sheer size of him,
Officer.
And just the sheer size of him, and the passing ability and that experience at his age now is going to be a big bonus to our squad. And maybe during the course of the season, he may even end up replacing Watson in as a full time as a first choice in that.
Yeah, we'll come back to Watson in a bit, and we'll also come back to some of the outgoing transfers, because there've been a lot of those. But first, this.
The Forest Ramble sketch by Jeremy Davis. Well, that's Sabri Lamouchi, eh? He's a bit good. Our new manager has given us the most exciting start to the season since, well, last season. Did you see Lewis Crabbon's goal against Fulham? Talk about total football. But with the international break bringing a much-needed rest for many of the Forest players after a busy month, I thought it would be good to dig a little deeper into the background of the man in charge. In his first interview with the club's YouTube channel, he repeatedly stressed the importance of walking differently. But rather than a Monty Python reference, I realised this was a quirk of pronunciation, and the guy was actually talking about work. A shame, as it might have opened up a new role at the club for Ian Wone, who Frank Clark used to say walked too much for a footballer. Watching his interviews throughout the month, he continues to exude an air of je ne sais quoi, seemingly always on the verge of a full-blown Gallic shrug, a sort of cross between Cantona-esque intensity and Ginola style insouciance. No Shakespeare, seagulls or shampoo ads yet, but there have been touches of philosophy, most notably when he skewered the interviewer who asked him how he had enjoyed staying in London between the Palace and Fulham games with the measured retort, "Enjoy is a big word," which might be disputed by Scrabble players, unless you can get the J on a triple word score. It turns out that Sabri the player was quite different from the chilled-out Gallic entertainer who runs the Forest team now. A quick YouTube search reveals him to have been a midfielder with a good engine and a handy ability to miss-hit the ball into the net, much like a Forest manager of yesteryear, David Platt, although there it must be hoped the similarities end. There are a few good goals on there too. Against Marseille in 1996, he surges through the middle and slips the ball wide for future World Cup winner and Newcastle's least favourite striker until Michael Owen came along, Stefan Guy Varche, who was clearly warming up for not scoring in the World Cup final by not scoring here, knocking a shot against the keeper's legs, but it breaks to our Sabri just inside the box to half volley into the net. In another uncomfortable parallel with David Platt, Lamouchi spent a few seasons playing for some of Italy's lesser lights. Look up Lamouchi Parma on YouTube and marvel at the sight of the dynamic, surging figure who will become Forest's current manager, thwacking a long-range shot past a bewildered-looking Gigi Buffon. Is it me, or do international goalies always look a little indignant when a player not as famous as them scores a goal? Buffon genuinely looks like a man who can't believe what's just happened. A bit like the expression we all had when we realised that Boris Johnson was the Prime Minister. Best of all, though, is one he got for Marseille in 2006, featuring in a series called Droit au but, which apparently is French for straight to the point, and is set, funnily enough, to the soundtrack of Jump by Van Halen. A long, long cross comes in from the left touchline, two central defenders misread the bounce in a manner that would make David James proud, and our Sabri, lurking on the far right of the box, spanks a volley into the top corner from an angle so obtuse that Cantona is using it as a point of reference. They say good players don't always make good managers, but early indications are that in this case, we're in safe hands.
Okay, welcome back and to part 2 of the Forest Ramble podcast for September. Just on the subject of John Bostock, who we were talking about a minute ago, the best way I can put it is to say that he's looked really composed. And I think that's the kind of, that thing of not looking hurried, not looking harried, is something that comes when you've played some football in other countries as well. Because obviously the style of football isn't quite as kick and rush as it sometimes is in the Championship.
It reminds me a little bit of Guardiola when he first came in to Forest the first time round, sort of spraying the ball around, but having that physical presence as well.
But less likely to get robbed.
Yeah.
I think he's that. I say to me, it's that composure.
It is. He's more composed on the ball, and he just looks like a player who can keep it simple, and he'll help you keep control of matches from the midfield. Keeping it simple is not always a bad thing, because if you keep the ball moving, you're looking for options, trying to find little triangles and trying to find your teammates, and that's not a bad thing in the middle of the park. To keep a game ticking over and to keep your team in control of the game and the tempo. And I think Bostock can be a real asset for Forest, and from the interviews I've seen with him, he seems like a really well-spoken guy, an intelligent guy as well, on and off the pitch. And I'm excited to see what he can do in a Forest shirt over the season. And
there's a really good interview with him on The Athletic where he knows he's very grounded because of the experience he had of being like this 15-year-old wunderkind, getting a big money transfer that didn't work out. You know, he's quite open about the fact that he regrets the transfer happening from Palace to Tottenham. And that actually, if he had his time again, that's not how he'd play the game now. But obviously, you know, that's the way things have gone. But it means that he's very, very grounded, and he's very, very sort of... He's career focused, but he's wanting to do it in the right way now. And those kinds of things are very important. Now, with regards to that role in the team, clearly it seems as though it's likely to be him or Watson. And that is a really pivotal role in the Lamouchi setup, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Watson's done nothing wrong so far, and he's played well.
I'm just going to say this out loud. Watson has been one of the best players this season.
Yeah, and so at the moment there's no urgency to move him on. I think maybe it's just where situations where we need a more of a slightly attacking slant on the team. That's where maybe Bostock would just go in ahead of him slightly now.
I mean,
or even one of the other players. I mean, I think definitely Watson should be in the starting 11 and sort of one of the first names on the sheet at that start off with. But it's just when I think as we saw in the Derby game, we can probably maybe put in 3 or 4 attacking players if we need to.
Well, I mean, I think that's where, in terms of the qualities they offer, I think Watson, in terms of his reading of the game in that central defensive midfielder position, that's why he's in pole position. Bostock will have a better ability to spray the ball out and also to bring the ball out from that defensive position. But it's basically the same role as Fernandinho has made his own for Man City until this season.
The Ginger Fernandinho.
He is. Ben Watson, the Ginger Fernandinho. You've heard it here first. Okay? And the thing that role is massively important because the fullbacks, when Forest are in possession in a defensive position, the fullbacks push forward, the centre-halves push wide, and then that central midfielder drops in to make the extra man. And that is massively important. There's an excellent article by Forrest Boffin which covers some of that in a bit more depth and in more detail than I can. But that is a really, really important role in the way that Lamouchi sets up. And that was really, really exemplified in that amazing first goal at Fulham, wasn't it, Stephen?
Yeah, it was. It just gave us the platform to start that move and for that move to develop from the midfield, from the defence into midfield. Watson, he'll always have his detractors at Forest. He's become that. There always has to be a scapegoat if you're among the Forest fans for some reason. I think now Benny Osborne's moved on. It's more so Watson who's taken on that mantle. I think unfairly, and certainly on the basis of his performances this season, it's completely undeserved.
And going back to Forrest Boffin, when he was doing his research for that article, I'm assuming Forrest Boffin is a he. When Forrest Boffin was doing their research for the article, they did put out, what's your ideal, your first choice lineup on the base. And you know what? Very few people mentioned Watson. I was just saying Watson's been one of the best players we've had this season. He's been one of the most important players. And I guess that's the danger if you're playing that role, is that people only notice you when you're getting it wrong.
Yeah, you'll be underappreciated. It's a famous role for that, isn't it? Think of players like John McGovern and Claude Makelele down the years, so sort of unsung heroes.
Well, even until last season, Fernandinho at City, people didn't realise how important he was until basically last year. Because, let's be honest, your Stones and Laporte are not always the most reliable centre-halves, but they look so much more comfortable because they've got that Fernandinho there to kind of to act as the extra man, to give them the short pass out, as opposed to Stones trying his Hollywood passes. So, and it means that, for example, in Forest's case, Joe Worrell, we know his distribution isn't amazing. It means he's got that outlook. One way he's got the fullback, the other way he's got Watson or Bostock. Very important role. Yeah,
and you can't underestimate Watson's experience as well. He's played a lot of football in his career, and having that experience in the spine of the team, it has been important this season. And when you throw in Dawson behind him as well, alongside Worrell, I think the two of them are working well there with Joe Worrell, who, by the way, looks a completely different player this season to the last time we saw him in a Forest shirt.
Well, it's not a coincidence that he's playing with people like that. He's had his year up in Scotland, which was a mixed bag. So he's learning from it, but he himself said on the radio, how can he not learn when he's got Michael Dawson next to him and when he's got Ben Watson sitting alongside?
I think his distribution's been okay, to be honest.
His distribution has been okay, but he's not going to do those kind of incisive passes. It means that he can focus on doing the simple things, which is giving it, the old John McGovern thing of giving it to someone else who knows what they're doing with it.
Yeah.
So I think those are really important things to point out. The other thing which I've not read or seen anywhere else, but I'd like to say, is also that Watson was officially the club captain, and this season Dawson appears to have become club captain again. And yet Watson's playing the best football of his career in a red shirt. So to me, that suggests that he is a great professional. He's not focusing upon the ego factor there. He's saying, you know what, Dawson's a club legend, he's the captain, I'm going to still do my job.
Absolutely. And if you look at the setup of the team, the two of them are playing a really important role with their experience. And I'm biased when it comes to Michael Dawson because I love the guy, but it's so good to see him back in the team, fit and playing consistently, because we are stronger.
And he's just a colossus,
Yeah,
isn't he?
we're just better when he's in the team. And he scored against Birmingham as well, his first Forest goal for 15 years.
Lovely
Great
moment.
Yeah.
Lovely moment.
So that was great to see. And
especially after he didn't score that one at Leeds, where he just, he was thinking, what happens, never mind me, what happens if that's the chance, and then we end up coming away empty-handed.
Yeah.
So
the thing as well with him and Worrell just brings back memories of when Dawson was first breaking into the Forest team and playing alongside Des Walker, who was in his mid-30s, and he was playing that experienced role to the novice in Dawson, and now it's Dawson doing it for Worrell. That's great.
There's a lovely symmetry there, isn't there? And we were talking about that a year ago, before Karanka decided that he was going to send Worrell away. And so that's another thing that I'd like to say about Lamouchi, is that Karanka, we liked Karanka, I think we can all agree on that, but now we've got a manager who is also wanting to bring through the kids, as well as having a solid style of play, as well as getting the basics right. And those are really important things. Now, I'd like to then move on from the defensive midfield position to say that actually that idea of 2 players for every position in midfield, Alpha Samido, Sambas Sow, Thiago Silva, João Carvalho, John Bostock. Okay, we've got real almost embarrassment of riches there at the moment, haven't we? And again, it's seamless. When one isn't playing and the other is, and actually the Preston match was a really good example of that, because Samido, I really like he's an old-fashioned box-to-boxer, isn't he? But then it didn't work out for him, so he made a subtle change of bringing on Sambas Sow, whose kind of different form of physicality made a huge difference to the Forest performance in the second half.
It did, and both of those players have made positive impacts already in their Forest careers. Samido at times is brilliant to watch. The way he can pick the ball up and carry it forward. He can hold off defenders and midfielders as they're coming in to try and challenge him for the ball. He can win the ball back himself. He's got that real all-round midfield battling in him, a little bit like the Patrick Vieira or Roy Keane kind of player. So yeah, he does catch the eye in that sense, but he's been really good in the most part. And Sambas Sow as well has come in and has not let anybody down when he's.
I'd go further than that. I've been really impressed by Sambas Sow, and for me, he'd been our strongest first 11. I was really surprised when he didn't start against Preston, because I thought he'd come in, and I think Mouchi admitted he maybe made a slight mistake by not picking him there. Maybe underestimated Preston slightly before the match, but I think in our strongest 11, he'd always played for me. He's one of the first names on the sheet, along with Samba the goalkeeper, Dawson.
Sambas Sow, though, I can't quite put my finger upon, because, on paper, he's also a box-to-boxer who's got a good level of physicality about him. He's got a good physique. He's tall. He's rangy.
He's got everything. He's so big. He's a really good big physical presence, but with that, he's able to have good mobility as well, which is rare. You don't often get both in one player, and he passes the ball.
Yeah,
and
maybe he's not quite as good in terms of taking the ball forward to the opposition box as Samido. Samido's good with running with the ball, isn't he?
You'd play him with either Samido or Silva or Carvalho or Lolly, but you need that physical presence. The game against Birmingham was just brilliant, because him and Samido just bullied the Birmingham midfield. They were playing with a bunch of quite small players, and you're looking at the size difference between our midfield and their midfield. It was stark, and you could just see them just going up and getting the ball at will off them, and just giving us a platform to play.
Okay, I mean, we're not going to cover every single player and every single position in on the park, but what I will also say is that brings us to another factor, which was very apparent from the first match of the season, but particularly in the Leeds match. The commentators are talking about it. It's very obvious. Forest now have got a physical presence in terms of size, in terms of aggression. And you look at Forest now, the classic example is you look at corners, whether we be attacking them or whether we be defending them, suddenly Forest don't look like a soft touch.
Yeah, nobody's going to bully us this season.
Right. It seems like we've woken up a bit in terms of what Championship football requires. It might be Lamouchi, it might be the recruitment team, it might be both, but they've identified where where we needed to strengthen over the summer, and they've gone out and got players like Semedo, Sal for that physical presence, technical players like Thiago Silva and John Bostock, and it seems like they're just getting that balance right of having that physical presence, but also the skill to go and win games.
I think the recruitment team did admit over the French guy who's the chief scout.
Your boyfriend?
Yeah.
Modesto,
that's it. I think he admitted that they know what sort of players they need in the Championship now. I think they were bringing different types of players in initially, but now they sort of obviously identified and watched it. He's been based in England for the best part of the year now, so he's seen what's actually required. It's different from working in Greece and looking at it on TV.
I do want to mention a few players who are no longer at the club, including that are the so-called deadwood. So Jason Cummins has got his move, and I don't think that's a big loss. In fact, I think that's probably a good thing for everyone at Forest, isn't it? Daryl Murphy moves on, I think, with everyone's blessing, as does Liam Bridker, although that's only for a loan, isn't it? But also, if those help out Bolton after the horrendous mismanagement that they've had, then that's got to be, I think that's a good thing.
He'll be a really good player for them in League One.
You'd hope so.
Really good.
Yeah, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? And he's a kind of player that you'd hope would be able to have some control of matches and really help them through. We've seen a couple of the kids move out on loan as well. So you mentioned there Virgil Gomes and Jayden Richardson. There was hopes for Jayden Richardson to maybe get in the first team until we signed Jenkinson, but now he's going off to Exeter. And then the one that really kind of caught the eye was Arvin Appiah. Was that a surprise to you, Maradona Midlands?
It was a surprise to me. I thought everybody at Forest had high hopes for him, and he'd been tied down to a long contract fairly recently. So to see him go out was a big shock, and especially the destination is the second division in Spain. It just seems
they've got a benefactor, so they're able to spend some money. I mean, Stephen, to me, this seems like a real indicator of the way that life is if you are a Championship football club now with an academy.
Yeah, when you're creating or bringing through talented players, other teams higher up the chain are going to be looking at them, and it is going to be difficult if you're not a Premier League club to keep hold of those young talents. We've seen it before when we got picked off for Ollie Burke, even a bit further back, Lascelles and Darlow leaving. It's just one of those things. And also when you take into account financial fair play, something like this might be a move that balances the books for a season and just make sure that we're operating on an even footing.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the Ollie Burke transfer and Darlow and Lascelles. I think there is a crucial difference here, which is that both those three transfers there were done partly because they were done by the chairman, for Waz sold them without his manager's consent, without even telling them that was going to happen. So that's obviously not a good thing. But then, crucially, those were done because they had to be done. And in the case of Ollie Burke, although it's not jeopardised us in the long term, there was no sell-on either. So we got that transfer fee, and then there's no sell-on, and we'd have made like £25,000 as a sell-on from him anyway. But this one has been done for a player who isn't crucial to the first team like Darlow and Lascelles and Ollie Burke were at the time, is probably about fourth or fifth choice as the winger. Brennan Johnson's moved above him. Alex Myton's moved above him. Jayden Richardson's possibly moved above him in terms of as first-team prospects. So in that sense, 8 million plus significant sell-on clauses for a player who wasn't going to play seems like good business, doesn't it?
I agree. And if you weigh it up against the prospect of losing Joe Lolly or Lewis Grabban, who would you rather lose at this stage? Would you rather lose one of those two, or would you rather lose Arvin Appiah for 8 million? You'd probably say Appiah, because he's not going to have that impact on the first team that the likes of Lolly and those big name players are at the minute. So if it means you're keeping hold of your best players and giving yourselves a better chance of achieving something this season, it is a risk, but it's one worth taking, I think.
And if Appiah in a few years ends up playing for a Premier League club and scoring goals and creating chances, then at least we're not going to be thinking, oh, he's one that got away, because actually in terms of financial fair play, that's basically covered. It's not covered the losses, but it's covered the financial fair play margin, I suppose, along with saving £40,000 a week on wages with the players like Cummins and Murphy and Bridcut who've been moved on, which actually equates to £2 million a year. So there you go. In the space of like 24 hours business, yeah, we've still got players like Pantilimon and Zach Clough who are still on the books, and we probably expected them to be moved on. But that's £10 million saving, which in FFP terms is very significant, considering that it boils down to £13 million a year acceptable losses. So that's mitigated massively. We may not like it, but it's the modern game, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in financial terms, it makes sense. I mean, there's no guarantee that Appiah is ever going to be a top class professional first teamer and playing in sort of the Premier League or La Liga or anything. So, in that perspective, getting £8 million in.
But if he is, then we'll have made a good fee out of him anyway.
Yeah, we will.
And with the sell-on clauses and so on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another transfer out worth mentioning is Adlan Gediora, who's gone to Qatar. So that's another, I would say, significant wage off the books.
Yeah, and it's been reported, unsubstantiated, that he's probably one of the highest earners. But then there's all the other off-pitch stuff that we've heard about him, most notably in the aftermath of Martin O'Neill leaving, and there's no reason to doubt any of that. I do just want to move on to managers. Okay, the thing that I was just thinking about this when I was travelling the other day, and all of a sudden it sort of occurred to me: Lamouchi, he's basically like a new Sean O'Driscoll, in the sense that Sean O'Driscoll came in with 3 weeks to go and built a team that was able to do a good job. Now, very different circumstances, because Lamouchi's got a recruitment team around him and money to spend. But in that sense, he's come in, he hit the ground running, he's got on with it. Crucially, in the case of Lamouchi, he's not someone who knew the Championship before, as O'Driscoll very much was. But in that sense, I think there's a lot of parallels. And then you contrast that with Martin O'Neill, who spent those first 2 months in the job saying, well, I'm still learning about the players and what they can do. We've not heard any of that with Lamouchi. Like, one of the things I really have loved about him is the way in which he's been very calm and very measured, but he's put his players first. And that's something that I've really liked about him. So, for example, after the Derby match, when Brennan Johnson was really, really good for an hour in the number 10 role, said, Brennan, go out and play. If you do well, you'll stay with the first team. If you don't do well, you'll stay with the first team. What a positive thing to say, and to say that publicly to boost his player.
Yeah, I think he's been very impressive in all respects. He's quite charismatic.
And he swore live on Radio Nottingham.
And
he's honest.
He's plain talking. He speaks well, especially considering sort of English isn't his first language. He's communicated brilliantly well, and he just put a team together that sort of plays nice football and has got a good spirit about it. And as long as that's happening, the Forest fans are going to be happy.
I think as well, one of the things we talked about under O'Neill, and this isn't about criticising O'Neill and, saying, oh, Lamouchi's everything O'Neill isn't, but I think it also shows that actually, as we discussed at the time, generational factors are massively important. Lamouchi, even if the players don't necessarily know him, although John Bostock clearly did, and maybe Brice Samba clearly did as well, but they... In terms of the age gap and the mentality that goes with that age gap, that's something that Lamouchi's we've heard a lot about the players, about how much they've enjoyed it since Lamouchi's come in.
That's been the big thing that I've taken away from it. The players have sort of made a point of saying how much they've enjoyed training, and that's sort of translating out onto performances on the pitch and the way they sort of the movement and the play, bringing it out from the back. You can see it. It's been drilled into
happy them workers are productive workers.
Yeah, it's drilled into them onto the training ground. It's been very impressive.
Okay. And then I did put out a Twitter poll, which, due to internet issues, I can't actually access at the moment. But, there's a 21st century and this is the way we roll. But the questions that I asked, number one, I said, based upon the first month of the season to Forest supporters, and we had somewhere in the region of 370 votes on this, where do you see Forest finishing? And the vast majority said we've got a team that looks like it's capable of the playoffs. The next most popular option was mid-table. 1%, I think it's probably less than 1%, said relegation form. So, maybe there's a Derby fan who got involved there. And then a small handful said maybe automatic. Now, I don't think we're there yet. I think the way in which that poll has split is probably matching the way that we feel, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say playoffs is a realistic target for this season. Having said that, I don't think if we put our first team out, I don't think there's a team better than us in the division.
I think crucially, one of the things that we've gained, we go back to the West Brom match, which we lost, and deservedly so, but the seeds were sown in terms of Forest actually are a steady team. They have a lot of qualities, and I think as well, the most important thing, which we've talked about again in the past, consistency. So the second part of the poll was rating about how you think Lamouchi's done as a manager. And I gave excellent. Not many people went for that. I think something like 90% of people went for good. And then a couple of people went for meh. And then I don't know if anyone went for not very good. But I actually think that's a bit harsh on him. I'd say that he's made an excellent start to life at the City Ground.
Yeah, me too. I mean, considering what short period of time he's had and the sort of the transition in sort of style of play.
And the kind of the turmoil that engulfed the City Ground from December through to his arrival in July.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then the final part of the poll was to do with, who do you think's been the best player so far? And I put down as options Lolly and Graben and Dawson. I said, if not, then name. And the options that other people came up with, we had quite a few Joe Worrells. We had our very own Baz said Watson and said, I'm going to duck now. But, we've already talked about what an important role Watson has there. And then a few others going for Samido and quite a few for Sambas Sow. Are there any others that you want to throw in there, Stephen?
I think in the few games that he's had, Brice Samba has impressed me. He's just come into the team and been he's been composed, but he's been commanding, and he at the moment there's no way that Muric is getting back in the team because he's got the shirt Samba and he's playing well in it.
Yeah. Okay. Maradona Midlands.
I think everybody's played well. Amiobi in spells has been very impressive. He's really sort of...
And again, actually, this is something that we can talk about again, is that we've got that kind of almost seamless slotting in. So when Amiobi has come in and he's done a job, but then Adoma's selected and Adoma did so well against Derby. I mean,
everybody. I mean, you look at Silva, he's done... I mean, from the first game, we thought he looked a little bit lightweight, is not going to do his defensive work, but since then, he's turned it around. He's getting his tackles in and working hard. You can't really criticise anybody.
And I'm not quite sure how Jacques Carvalho is going to fit back into the first team, but in his cameo appearance, there's two cameo appearances, a goal and an assist. Well, what more can you want?
Competition, isn't it?
Exactly.
Competition for places.
Even Rafa Mir, I know he's not scored yet, but he looks a decent player.
Well, like I said in my Derby match report, if that one where Johnson had laid him in, if there hadn't been a good full-length save from the keeper, I think Mir would have scored another one in the second half. And we'd see a different player. Like, he got some unfair stick after that Derby match. People saying he looks a bit of a donkey. It's like, don't be silly. He's just a different type of striker, and as with the majority of strikers, and I wouldn't count Graben in this, but as with the majority of strikers, he just needs one to just bounce off his arse and go in, and then he'll be a different player.
He does, and I'm sure, given more game time, he will get his goals. There's only really him and Graben who are our out-and-out strikers, so there'll be plenty of opportunity for him as well.
That's the only sort of worry I have at this stage, is if anything does happen to Graben between now and January, it may scupper us slightly. But fingers crossed. Hopefully it doesn't.
I also suspect that Lamouchi has got something up his sleeve, because Rafa Mir can play as a kind of the number 9, but actually we've not been playing. Graben isn't a number 9, is he? He's a fox in the box. And I also wonder if actually there's going to be the possibility of, if we don't play with an out-and-out striker, that we could do, just the Guardiola comparison again. Guardiola pioneered the idea of having a false 9 with Messi playing in the false 9 role. I'm wondering if a Carvalho or a Thiago Silva or a Brennan Johnson even, we saw that in pre-season, whereby in the later stages of some of those matches that he was just playing around with actually having the 2 wingers being a little bit more advanced, and then just having a Silva or a Brennan Johnson in that false 9 role. So I think that's a possibility. It's not something we want to have to test as an enforced measure, I guess. Okay, just to finish off then, Stephen, what have we got to look forward to in the next month?
Well, Forest have got a couple of away games this month.
Starting off with a real toughie.
Yeah, top of the table Swansea next weekend on the 14th, so that is a difficult game.
And that's going to be down to resilience again, isn't it?
Yeah, you get the impression that it's going to be another one of those games where Forest are having to do plenty of defending. They're going to be up against it at times, because Swansea are top of the table for a reason. They're in form and winning games. So we might have to go there and batten down the hatches a bit, but we've shown already this season we're capable of going to teams like this and getting results. So, yeah, that'll be a good test. And then it's followed up with a home game against Barnsley, which you would hope is a game that Forest can come out of with 3 points. And then after that is the League Cup third round away at Arsenal.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one, because obviously it'll be interesting to see what teams both clubs put out. And as an occasion, it's going to be a great one, isn't it?
Yeah, first time that Forest have played Arsenal since 1999. First time they played at the Emirates, so that'll be a good.
And of course, let's just remind ourselves of what happened last time Forest played Arsenal in the cup competition. About a year and a half ago.
There's one cup game each. They beat us in the League Cup a couple of years ago. We beat them in the FA Cup, so this could be the decider.
And that one was well known for ending Per Mertesacker's career.
I should say, I said first time since 99. First time we've played them away since 1998 even. 99. So so that's it's a big tie for Forest, and they're going away to a Premier League club, a team who we've had a little bit of success over recently, as you've already said. So, yeah, that'll be a good game for the Forest players to go and enjoy, and one for the fans as well.
Okey-doke. And then after that, away at Stoke. Given Stoke's current predicament, you'd again hope that that's a chance for Forest to get some good points. And then Blackburn at home after that.
Well, Blackburn away.
Away.
Blackburn away, 2 away games on the bounce.
So it's going to be tricky in terms of having 2 away games on the bounce. But again, Blackburn away is going to be quite a tough proposition, I think.
You would think so. They're a mid-table team, but they're a tough team.
But they've got something about them, haven't they?
There's no easy games in the Championship.
I think last year we had it finished 2-2.
2-2, missed the
penalty. So,
but if we get one, he's not going to be taking it. So,
and then after that, it's a home game against Brentford, which again could be a tough one. They've made life difficult for us down the years. So, I would hope that Forest can come out of this month with, a good amount of points, a decent total when you've got the likes of Barnsley and Stoke who are not doing so well, and a home game against Brentford. There's an opportunity there to come out with 9, possibly even 12 points, which I think it's a little bit of wishful thinking, but hey, it's the hope that kills you.
But you know what, as well, it's bearing in mind Forest have shown themselves to be consistent and resilient, and at the moment they've got a bit of momentum, and that can take you a long way in the Championship.